I'm a currency exchange clerk at the main train station in Prague, and I've seen some things. But nothing prepared me for the American businessman who slid 500 Czech crowns across my counter and asked me to change it into real money. When I explained that Czech crowns were real money, he stared at me like I'd just told him the earth was flat. "No," he said slowly, like I was the confused one. "I mean dollars, actual currency. Sir, you're in the Czech Republic. This is actual currency." He left my window muttering about how Europe needed to get organized with their money situation. Most people would stop at stories like this. I don't. I track these patterns across dozens of countries, so you can see the psychology behind them. If you want that kind of clarity every week, you know where the subscribe button is. Last summer, in Bangkok, my cousin watched an American couple argue with a 7-Eleven cashier for 10 minutes because they couldn't understand why their quarters didn't work. They kept pushing the coins across the counter, speaking louder each time, as if volume would magically transform US quarters into Thai baht. The cashier finally called the manager, who gently explained that Thai stores don't accept American coins. The woman's response? "Well, that's ridiculous. Money is money." My cousin still brings this up at family dinners. Then there was the tourist at Heathrow Airport, who tried to pay for a 8-dollars sandwich with a $100 bill and got genuinely angry when the coffee shop couldn't break it. "It's legal tender," he insisted, waving the bill around. "You have to take it." The teenage cashier, barely holding it together, explained that British shops aren't required to accept foreign currency, especially not American bills. The guy ended up storming off, sandwichless, yelling something about customer service standards. My favorite? The exchange student in Seoul who thought the 50,001 note was fake because no real country makes bills worth that much. That's about $37, by the way. She genuinely believed she'd been scammed and tried to report the bank to the police. But that was just the beginning of what became the most educational month of my career. The first big lesson came from a retired couple from Florida who walked into my exchange booth at Prague's main station on a rainy Wednesday morning. They had a mix of euros and Czech crowns, and they wanted to know why the numbers were so different. "This says 500, the husband said, holding up a crown note. "But you're saying it's only worth $20? That doesn't make sense. 500 should be 500. I tried explaining exchange rates, how different currencies have different values, how the Czech crown has a different relationship to the dollar than euros do. He nodded along, seeming to understand, then asked if I could just make them the same number, because it was too confusing to do math on vacation. His wife agreed. They wanted me to give them $500 for 500 crowns, because it's easier that way. I showed them the official exchange rate posted on the wall, the one mandated by the Czech National Bank. The husband squinted at it and said, "Well, that rate seems wrong." They left convinced I was running some kind of scam, despite the rates being identical to every other exchange office in the city. I watched them walk to the booth next door, have the exact same conversation, and storm off again. Through the window, I could see them trying a third office before finally giving up. 2 weeks later, I had an American college student who'd been backpacking through Eastern Europe. She came to my window near closing time on a Friday, looking exhausted. She had crumpled bills from 4 different countries: Polish zloty, Hungarian forints, Romanian lei, and Czech crowns. "Can you just combine all this into euros?" she asked. "I'm so tired of doing math." The problem? She thought currency exchange worked like a blender. Just throw it all in, and out comes something standardized. When I explained I'd have to convert each currency separately, calculate the fees, and then exchange to euros, she looked devastated. "But that's so complicated," she said. Can't you just estimate? She genuinely believed exchange rates were more like suggestions than fixed numbers. After 20 minutes of calculations, she ended up with about 80 euros from what she'd thought was at least 200 worth. She kept asking where the rest went, convinced the exchange fees were illegal. The next memorable one was a business traveler from Texas passing through Prague on his way to a conference in Vienna. He wanted to exchange $5,000 into euros, but when I told him the total, he insisted I'd miscounted. 5,000 should give me 5,000, he said firmly. That's how numbers work. I explained again about exchange rates. He pulled out his phone and showed me that the dollar and euro symbols looked similar, as if that proved they should have the same value. They're both money, he reasoned. They should be equal. This went on for 15 minutes. Other customers lined up behind him, checking their watches. He wanted to speak to my manager. My manager came out, explained the exact same thing, and the man finally accepted his euros with a speech about how the global economy is rigged against Americans. Before leaving, he asked if we could work something out for next time, like a loyalty program where eventually the rates would even out. Sir, that's not how international finance works. Then came the woman from Arizona with a suitcase full of coins. American coins. Pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, all mixed together in a canvas bag that must have weighed 10 pounds. She'd been traveling through Europe for 3 weeks and kept trying to use them in shops. Now she wanted to exchange them for Czech crowns. I had to explain, as gently as possible, that we don't exchange coins, especially not foreign coins, and definitely not American coins that were worth maybe $20 total but would cost more to ship and process than their actual value. She didn't believe me. She dumped the coins on my counter, counting them out loud to prove their worth. See? That's $67 right there. You have to take it. I showed her our policy, posted in English right above my window. No coin exchanges. She argued that policy shouldn't apply to legitimate American currency, as if U.S. coins held some special international status. Eventually, security had to escort her out because the line behind her stretched across the terminal. She left the coins on the counter. I still have them in a drawer somewhere. The pattern became clear after a few dozen of these encounters. Americans struggle with foreign currency because they're used to the dollar being accepted everywhere at home. You can use dollars in all 50 states from Alaska to Florida, from Maine to Hawaii. One currency, one value, no exchange rates to memorize. So when they travel abroad and suddenly money isn't standardized, it feels wrong to them, like the rules changed without warning. I had a guy from Michigan argue that vendors should just accept dollars and do the conversion themselves to make things easier for tourists. When I pointed out that would require every shopkeeper in Prague to know current exchange rates and do mental math for every transaction, he shrugged and said, "They should have apps for that." He couldn't grasp why a Czech bakery wouldn't want to deal with foreign currency when Czech crowns work just fine. My brother works at a hotel front desk in Reykjavik, and he has his own collection of currency confusion stories. Last autumn, an American family checked in and immediately had questions about Icelandic krona. The father looked at the welcome packet, saw that breakfast cost 2,500 krona per person, and refused to believe it. "That's insane," he said. "You're charging 2,500 for breakfast? That's highway robbery." My brother explained that 2,500 krona equals about $18. The man pulled out a calculator, typed some numbers, and said, "No, it doesn't. 2,500 is 2,500. You can't just change what numbers mean." He thought exchange rates were a scam that hotels used to overcharge tourists. His wife nodded along, equally convinced. My brother pulled up the official exchange rate on the Central Bank of Iceland website. They looked at it, looked at each other, and the husband said, "Well, That website must be part of the scam. They paid for breakfast in dollars, insisting it was more honest, and got upset when my brother had to calculate the exchange on the spot and give them change in krona. "Why can't you just give me dollars back?" the man asked. "Because this is Iceland, sir, and we don't keep large amounts of foreign currency in the register." They left a review online claiming the hotel refuses to use normal money. A tour guide, friend in Buenos Aires, told me about an American tourist who couldn't understand Argentine pesos. The exchange rate was around 350 pesos to $1 at the time, which meant a 10,000 peso bill was about $28. This tourist kept looking at his bills and panicking. "I'm carrying thousands of pesos," he said. "This is too much money. I feel like I'm going to get robbed." My friend explained that 10,000 pesos wasn't actually that much. He spent the next hour trying to deposit the money back, convinced there'd been an error. The bank staff tried explaining inflation and exchange rates, but he just kept saying, 50,000 is too much. Something's wrong. He eventually accepted that this was normal. But my friend said he watched the guy count his pesos obsessively for the rest of the tour, like they might multiply overnight. I had my own version of this with a digital nomad from California who came through Prague with money from 6 different countries. She'd been traveling for months and had accumulated leftover currency everywhere she went. The problem? She'd been mentally tracking her budget in dollars, but spending in whatever local currency she had, and now she had no idea how much money she actually possessed. She handed me a pile of bills: Thai baht, Polish zloty, euros, British pounds, Swiss francs, and Czech crowns. "Can you tell me how much this is?" she asked. I started sorting and calculating. The total came to about $340. She stared at me. "That can't be right. I had at least $800 when I started this trip." I explained that she'd spent the money. That's why she had less now. "No," she insisted. "I kept track. I should have more." She pulled out a notebook where she'd written down everything she spent, but all in the original currencies. She'd written 200 baht for dinner and 50 zloty for hostel, but never converted any of it to dollars to track her actual spending. When I helped her calculate it all, she realized she'd spent way more than she thought, because she'd been mentally treating all foreign money as less real than dollars. Then there was the exchange student in Fisitu, Copenhagen, who tried to pay for a 100 krone coffee with a 1,000 krone note on her first day. The barista asked if she had anything smaller. She didn't understand why it mattered. "It's just money," she said. The barista explained that breaking large bills early in the morning empties the register, making it hard to give change to other customers. The student got defensive. In America, stores have to take whatever legal money you give them. The barista, very patiently, explained that Denmark wasn't America, and that shops could refuse large bills for small purchases. The student ended up paying with a card, but not before announcing loudly that European money is too complicated. My colleague at the exchange booth told me about an American businessman who wanted to exchange exactly 1,000 dollars into Czech crowns, then immediately exchange it back to verify the rate was fair. He did this transaction, paid fees twice, and ended up with about $950. He then accused us of stealing $50 from him. When we explained that he paid exchange fees both times, he said, "That's double dipping. You can't charge me twice for the same money." "Sir, you made 2 separate transactions." He demanded to speak to corporate. "We don't have corporate. We're an independent exchange office." He left, threatening to report us to the American Embassy for currency fraud. The most baffling was a retiree from Ohio who came in with a spreadsheet. She'd calculated exchange rates between dollars and crowns, dollars and euros, dollars and pounds, and several other currencies. But she'd used rates from 2018. It was now 2024. She insisted we honor the rates she'd researched because she'd done her homework. When I explained that exchange rates change daily, sometimes hourly, she showed me her printed spreadsheet as if it were a legally binding document. "These are the official rates," she said. "From the internet." "Ma'am, those rates are 6 years old." She argued for 20 minutes before finally accepting current rates, but she kept muttering about false advertising. My roommate works at a pharmacy in Stockholm, and she's got stories about Americans and payment methods that kept me laughing for weeks. Sweden is basically cashless now. Most places don't even accept physical money anymore. Everything's card or mobile pay. So when an American tourist came in to buy cold medicine and pulled out a $50 bill, my roommate had to explain they don't take cash at all, and definitely not foreign cash. The tourist looked around the pharmacy like he was being pranked. "You're a store," he said. "Stores take money. That's how stores work." My roommate showed him the sign by the register. "We don't accept cash." He read it 3 times. "But what if someone doesn't have a card?" She explained that in Sweden, everyone has cards or mobile payment. He pulled out his American credit card, the kind with just a magnetic strip, no chip. The card reader rejected it immediately. "Your machine is broken," he announced. It wasn't broken. It just didn't accept old-style magnetic strip cards without chips. My roommate called over the manager, who tried the card on a different reader. Same result. They explained that European payment systems require chip cards for security. The tourist insisted his card works fine in America, which wasn't the problem. Eventually, they had to direct him to one of the few stores in Stockholm that still accepted cash, where he could exchange his dollars and then come back. He left saying something about how Sweden was living in the future wrong. A week later, my roommate had an American exchange student who'd been in Stockholm for 3 days and still hadn't figured out contactless payment. She kept inserting her chip card into readers when she was supposed to just tap it. The process went like this. She'd insert the card, the reader would beep angrily, she'd pull it out, insert it again, same beep, and finally, the person behind her in line would reach over and show her to just tap the card on the reader. This happened every single time she bought something. She told my roommate she didn't understand why European card readers were so picky compared to American ones. I had my own card catastrophe with a tourist from Nevada who wanted to exchange traveler's checks. Traveler's checks. In 2024, he had a stack of them, each for $100, and he seemed genuinely shocked when I told him most places in Europe stopped accepting them years ago. "But they're safer than cash," he protested. "The bank told me to get these." "When, sir?" 2003. He'd been sitting on these traveler's checks for over 20 years, waiting for the right trip, and now they were essentially useless. We spent 45 minutes calling different banks to find one that might still process them. Most had stopped entirely. He eventually found one bank way across town that would take them, but they charged a 15% processing fee because travelers' checks are so rare now that handling them requires special procedures. Then, there was the family from Georgia who'd brought preloaded travel cards denominated in euros. Smart move, right? Except they were in Prague, which uses Czech crowns, not euros. Every time they tried to use their euro cards, they got hit with currency conversion fees because the cards had to convert euros to crowns at the point of sale. They didn't realize this was happening until they checked their balance and saw it was way lower than expected. The father came to my booth, furious, demanding to know who was stealing from their cards. I explained the conversion fees. He said, "But we specifically got euro cards to avoid this." "Yes, but you're not in a country that uses euros." "Czech Republic is in Europe," he countered. "Europe uses euros, not all of it, sir." He couldn't accept that European countries might use different currencies. The family left Prague convinced they'd been scammed, never understanding they'd scammed themselves by not researching which countries actually use euros. My favorite card disaster came from a woman in her 60s, traveling solo through Eastern Europe. She'd been to Poland, Hungary, and now Czech Republic. And at each stop, she'd withdrawn cash from ATMs using her American debit card. What she didn't know was that her bank charged a 3% foreign transaction fee, plus ATM fees, plus the ATM's own fees, plus conversion rate markups. She was losing about 8 to 10% on every withdrawal. When she finally checked her bank account after 2 weeks of travel, she'd lost over $300 just in fees. She came to me, devastated, asking if there was any way to get it back. There wasn't. I tried explaining that she should have gotten a no-fee travel card before the trip. She kept saying, "But it's my money. How can they charge me to access my own money?" I felt genuinely bad for her. She'd worked hard to save for this trip, and her own bank had eaten up a chunk of her budget without her realizing it. The pattern I noticed was that Americans are used to cards working everywhere the same way. Swipe or insert, enter your PIN or sign, done. They're not prepared for chip requirements, contactless payment, card readers that work differently, or the reality that some countries are cashless while others are still heavily cash-based. And they're definitely not prepared for the fee structures that come with using American cards abroad. I had a guy from Tennessee who'd been charged dynamic currency conversion fees without knowing it. That's when a foreign terminal offers to charge your card in dollars instead of local currency, which sounds convenient, but actually costs more because they use terrible exchange rates. He'd been accepting this option every time because seeing the price in dollars felt more comfortable. By the end of his week in Prague, he'd overpaid by about $60 compared to if he'd just let his card do the conversion normally. When I explained this, he got quiet for a minute, then said, "So I paid extra for the privilege of seeing dollars?" "Exactly, sir, exactly." But my absolute favorite currency story happened just last month. An American woman in her 70s came to my exchange window looking confused, but determined. She had approximately 8,000 Czech crowns in various bills, some euros, and a handful of change from multiple countries. She'd been traveling through Europe for 5 weeks, and this was her last stop before flying home. "Can you help me figure something out?" she asked. I braced myself. I've been tracking my spending in a notebook, but I think I did it wrong. She pulled out a small journal with careful handwriting. Every expense was listed, but instead of converting to dollars, she'd just written the amounts in whatever currency she'd spent. 50 euros for the hotel in Rome, 200 crowns for groceries in Prague, 40 pounds for a museum in London. Page after page of numbers that meant nothing without context. "I thought it would be easier to convert everything at once when I got home," she explained. "But now I'm looking at these numbers, and I have no idea what I actually spent. Is that 50 euros more than 200 crowns? Are pounds worth more than euros?" She looked genuinely distressed. "I'm good at math. I was an accountant for 30 years. But this," she gestured helplessly at her notebook, "this broke my brain." I spent the next 45 minutes helping her go through every entry, converting each amount to dollars at roughly the exchange rates from when she'd made the purchases. The final total? About $3,800. She'd budgeted $4,000 for the whole trip. "Oh," she said, relief flooding her face. "I did okay." Then she started laughing. "I've been anxious about this for weeks. I kept thinking I'd overspent horribly. All because I couldn't figure out money that wasn't dollars." Before she left, she thanked me profusely and said something I think about a lot now. "You know what's funny? I've traveled all over the United States. I've been to 48 states. Never once had to think about currency. Never once had to calculate if I could afford something because the numbers meant something different. I thought traveling in Europe would be like that, just with different languages. I wasn't prepared for money itself to be foreign." She took her remaining crowns and euros, neatly organized them into labeled envelopes, and headed toward her gate. Through the window, I watched her stop at a coffee stand, pull out her notebook one last time to check something, then pay with her credit card instead. She'd learned, and these stories? They never stop coming. Every day brings a new tourist, A new confusion. A new moment where someone realizes that money isn't universal, that currency is culture, and that maybe they should have done a bit more research before assuming dollars would just work everywhere. My shift starts in 20 minutes. I wonder what today will bring.